Today, let's do Pythagorean Theorem, and I challenge you to score 7 out of 7 in 7 minutes. For this video tutorial to be effective, I will be using this format. 1. I will flash each question for 10 seconds, and you may pause the video whenever you want to try out the problem. Next, I will explain each and give you some strategies on how to deal with specific questions. Are you ready? Here we go. Today we will learn the Pythagorean Theorem. I assume that everyone heard the Pythagorean Theorem, but do we really understand what does this mean? We use Pythagorean Theorem to calculate for the missing sides of any right triangle. In this right triangle, C is the hypotenuse, and hypotenuse is always the longest side, and it's also across the 90-degree angle. The other two sides are called the legs. So A is one leg and B is also another leg. And according to the theorem, the square of the hypotenuse C, so we have C square, is equal to the sum of the squares of the other two sides A and B. That is why the formula is C square is equal to A square plus B square. Now let us use the Pythagorean theorem to calculate for the missing side of any right triangle. Here's question number 1. Find the value of x in the triangle shown below. The first thing that you always need to do is determine which side is the hypotenuse. And in this triangle, the hypotenuse is 13 because that is across the 90-degree angle. So using the formula C square is equal to A square plus B square, we can plug in now the C value, and the C value is 13 square. Now, for the A and B, it doesn't matter which one. So I can put x square plus 12 square. Or if you want, you could do 12 square plus x square. 13 square is 169. And 12 square is 144. So now we need to subtract 144 to both sides so we can isolate the variable x. Now this becomes 0. 169 minus 144 is 25. And then we have x square. If x square is equal to 25, what will be the x value? Square root of 25, right? Which is 5. Because you need to get the square root of 25 and the square root of x squared. So x is equal to 5. Question number 2. Find the value of x in the triangle shown below. In this question, x is the hypotenuse, right? Because this is the right angle, 90 degrees, and x is across that. So x is the hypotenuse. Again, by using the Pythagorean theorem, C square is equal to A square plus B square, our C is labeled x, so we put x square. Again, A and B can be interchanged, so we have 4 square plus 8 square, or that is 8 square plus 4 square. Simplifying this, we have x squared is equal to 4 squared is 16, 8 squared, 64, right? So now we have x squared is equal to 16 plus 64 is 80. And now we need to get the square root of both sides. So our x value is square root of 80, and that is not a perfect square. But if it is square root of 81, it will be 9, right? So we're expecting that the answer is going to be less than 9. So using your calculator, just plug in square root of 80, and you will get 8.94 rounded off to 2 decimal places. To write the answer in simplest radical form, you need to find factors of 80, and one of them should be the largest perfect square. So 80 is the same thing as 16 times 5. I use 16 because that's the largest perfect square. What is the square root of 16? 4, right? So that will be 4 outside and then put square root of 5. So you can have 4 square root of 5, that's the simplest radical form, or 8.94 as the decimal value. Question number 3. Find the value of x in the triangle shown below. In this figure, which one is the hypotenuse? X, right? So since x is the hypotenuse, then we can set up the equation as x squared is equal to 6 squared plus 8 squared. So now we have x squared is equal to 36 plus 8 squared is 64. Adding 36 and 64, we get 100. And now we get the square root of both sides. And the square root of 100 is 10. So the value of x is 10 units. Question 4. Find the value of x in the triangle shown below. In this figure, 4 is the hypotenuse. So we have 4 squared is equal to x squared plus 2 squared. 4 squared is 16. We have x squared plus 4. Now we subtract 4 to both sides. Then we have 12 is equal to x squared. Now we need to get the square root of both sides. So when you get the square root of both sides, then we have x is equal to root 12. And again, root 12 is less than the perfect square 16, so we're expecting the answer to be less than 4. Changing this to decimal, we simply use calculator, put square root of 12, and that will give us 3.46. That's the decimal equivalent of square root of 12. Now, to change this into simplest radical form, what are the two factors of 12, one of them being the largest perfect square? We cannot use 6 and 2 because both are not perfect square. But we can use 4 times 3 because 4 is a perfect square. What is the square root of 4? 2, right? So the answer is 2 square root of 3. Question number 5. Find the value of x in the triangle shown below. In this question number 5, which one is the hypotenuse? 10, right? So how will you set up the equation? It should be 10 squared is equal to x squared plus 6 squared. 10 squared is 100. We have x squared. 6 squared is 36. What will you do next? Subtract 36. So if you subtract 36 to both sides, then you will get 64 is equal to x squared. What's the next step again? Get the square root to both sides. So when you get the square root to both sides, what will be the value of x? It's 8, right? Because the square root of 64 is 8. It's a perfect square. So the x value here is 8. And one way to remember this is 3, 4, 5 is always a right triangle. So if you multiply the sides by 2, 6, 8, 10 will also be a right triangle. Question 6. Find the value of x in the triangle shown below. Which one is the hypotenuse? X, right? It's always the longest side and always across the 90-degree angle. So what's your equation? X squared is equal to 7 squared plus 9 squared. Now we have x squared is equal to 7 squared is 49, 9 squared 81. Adding it up, we have x squared is equal to 130. Now we need to get the square root to both sides. And when you get the square root to both sides, 130 is not a perfect square, so we can use 130. And to change this to decimal, just use your calculator. Square root of 130 will give us 11.4. Now, changing this to simplest radical form, the only factors of 130 are 13 and 10. And those are not perfect squares. None of those are perfect squares. So that means the simplest form will be square root of 130 in radical form, and the decimal is 11.4. Question number 7. Find the value of x in the triangle shown below. Without solving this figure, what's the x value? 5, right? A 3, 4, 5 will always be a right triangle. If you want to double check, you have x squared is the hypotenuse. So we have 3 squared plus 4 squared. So now we have x squared is equal to 9 plus 16. And that gives us x squared is equal to 25. Get the square root to both sides. So x is equal to 5. Again, 3, 4, 5 is always a right triangle. If you multiply this by 2, 6, 8, 10 will also be a right triangle. If you multiply 3 over 5 by 3, that will be 9, 12, and 15. 3, 4, 5 is the basic Pythagorean triple. So also 30, 40, 50 would still be a right triangle. Here are the answers. Did you score 7 out of 7? And were able to complete them in 7 minutes?